Well, hello. We are gathering here for session number 7 of our 10 Commandments Grow Group series. Who are you kidding? And we're tackling a couple more of the commandments. Actually, finishing up the commandments themselves, the last 2 of the commandments of the 10 Commandments. And next week, our study will be applying it to the New Testament and to our lives. So we have one more session next week. We'll do that. But we're going to begin off in prayer today. So Julie, please start us off.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the grow groups, Lord. I pray that your Holy Spirit will just lead and guide us today and just that we grow stronger and stronger more in you. And we just thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Our memory verse for this week is taken from Psalm 128, verse 1. I'm going to read it for you from the NIV version. You don't have to memorize it in the version that we use on Sunday. If you memorize in a different version that's better for you, good. You can go ahead and do that. I know many verses I've memorized in the King James from my growing up years, and I just have it in my brain. So the memory verse is, "Blessed are all who fear the Lord, who walk in his ways." Psalm 128, 1. They certainly are blessed. So for our icebreaker now, think back to the commercials we used in worship last fall, or perhaps one that you remember that you've seen recently. Why does it stick in your mind? Share what you think may be the marketing strategy or message in the commercial. In what way does it make you want something? If your group is watching the video, write the response in an email or text and share it with your group participants. As you read one of those responses, notice any particular marketing strategies that seem very effective amid your group members. So, introduce yourselves and share a commercial. My name is Pastor David, and I've been looking at a lot of commercials. We used commercials last fall. We used commercials 3 sessions ago. But this time we're looking at commercials with why it makes you want something, the whole coveting piece going on here. And I was just thinking about a commercial where a bunch of men were sitting in a room together watching the game, a football game, and the commercial was around the gear that they had to promote their team. And they were competing 2 different teams playing against one another, and they each had they kept upping the gear they had. The better gear, one gear than the other. And so, in the end, the commercial seemed to really suggest you've got to have the better stuff, and then the person with the better stuff, their team won. So it was that the superstitious idea where the better stuff changes your life and changes the outcomes. And so the marketing strategy there was certainly the better stuff you have, the more you spend on your stuff, the better stuff you have, the better your life will be. And so it's a matter of wanting that better. So that's my commercial.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, I can.
And your name?
I'm Tracy Bonsell. Hi. And I couldn't think of a specific one, but I think there's a lot of the marketing where you have a couple standing in a room painting, and then they step back and arms over each other like they're happy finished product. And I think I like the imagery of getting a project done with my husband, but the reality is it's time. There's usually at least 4 or 5 aspects of frustration, and the money, it's never quite that ideal, but it looks good in a commercial.
The reality is that you and your husband are arguing over what is happening.
Yeah, I mean, just
we're
not experts at that kind of stuff, so it's usually a learning process, and that's usually, we like to just know how to do everything versus having to learn probably is more the frustrating thing than...
The image of that serene, wonderful feeling was
all done.
you can have that by having the kind of paint.
Yes.
Solves your marriage conversations about painting.
Yes, and it just looks so great at the end, but in reality, and Andrew was, not to throw him under the bus, but the edging's never quite right.
Thank you.
I'm Julie Hovey, and I can talk about the Taco Bell commercials. the lady that I take care of, Darlene, she always says, when we go to Taco Bell, they don't look like that on the TV, all fresh and baked, they don't look like that. So, it's the commercial that I can kind of think of
So
now.
they show a
But,
romanticized version.
yeah, they just don't look like they do when they advertise it and get it on a plate and put it on the television. It's not quite the same.
It looks better than what you really get.
Yeah.
And you want what you think you can get rather than what it really comes out to be. Marketing strategy of what you want. Well, good. Think about and you at home, think about some of the commercials that you're watching lately. Stick to mind, and write them up in an email or a text or a Facebook post to your other group members. Kind of keep a compiling list of what marketing strategies. Talked about who has the better stuff, the product solves your home life for you, or promising more than what it can actually deliver at. As some of the strategies. All these kind of tie into our whole coveting theme, which is part of our lesson today. Also, a service we love, grow, serve, always in our group time as well, and everything we do as a church. So our serve moment is if there's a way that you as a church have been able to serve, or as a group have been able to serve together, that's kind of the key component here with our social distancing now. You might want to consider, if you haven't done that as a group yet, at this point I think I would put out the need for some prayer cover. I've been having lots of conversations with people who are feeling lonesome, who are slipping into a sense of darkness and downness and depression, people who are not having the social interaction to give them that boost, having a hard time maintaining routines, having a hard time feeling positive about life itself. And even if your group could just, you haven't done one yet, maybe just commit to doing a prayer time together, combating some of this spiritual darkness with some spiritual prayer. Prayer cover would be a key component. Not quite what we're hoping for, but this is something that's really needed right now. So consider that as a group. Or if you just want to just give 5 minutes tomorrow, praying for those who are really struggling with this isolation and feeling that darkness starting to really kind of set in and drag them down. Please combat that, if you will. All right, grow. Engage in God's Word. We're going to read some of the Bible passages, and Tracy's going to start us off here.
Exodus 20:16 through 17. Do not testify falsely against your neighbor. Do not desire your neighbor's house. Do not desire and try to take your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox, donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor.
And then we'll go next to Proverbs, a number of passages there. Julie, please, take us through some Proverbs.
All right, Proverbs 19:5 is, a false witness will not go unpunished, and he who speaks lies will not escape. And then we've got Proverbs 21:28. One is, a false witness shall perish, but the man who hears him will speak endlessly. And then 25:18. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. And then I've got 26:18 and 19. Like a madman who throws firebrands, arrows, and death is the man who deceives his neighbor and says, I was only joking. So I'm reading out of the New King James Bible too.
I was only joking. I mean, as a joke. Just kidding. But yet, those are very cutting, isn't it? Right.
Yes. Think of a time when everyone got presents, but they were not all the same value. Remember a time that clearly your gift was far inferior to the gift others received. Reflect on your feelings of wanting what somebody else got and your inner compulsion to try to find some way of getting it. What constrains you to not act on these feelings? Call to mind times when you acted out on these kinds of feelings and consider how now, after the fact, you feel about what you did. The aim of this study is the exploration of issues relating to both truth and coveting, to work out what the Bible says and how it might affect us in our everyday lives. The 9th commandment is about bearing false witness, and the 10th commandment is about coveting. Issues relating to the nature of truth, trust, deceit, and misrepresentation, or false news, are all relevant here. How does our understanding of the nature of God affect our view of these things? Is it sometimes kinder to lie, for example, telling someone that they look very good when it is obvious that their new outfit really does not suit them? Opinions may vary, but what would truth-telling look like in these situations? Greed, jealousy, and discontent lie at the heart of all coveting. It sometimes seemed as if our whole economic system depends on the encouragement of these things that the Bible consistently sees as sinful. What biblical resources do you draw on to assist you in resisting these pressures of society? The biblical concepts of being content is key here. Yet, does contentment stifle ambition? And if so, is this a good or a bad thing? The Bible condemns selfish ambitions, Galatians 5:20, Philippians 2:3, James 3:16, but encourages striving for good, 2 Corinthians 13:11, 1 Thessalonians 5:15, 1 Timothy 4:10. How do we achieve balance between these?
That is the wrestling of the Christian life, isn't it, there?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, good questions. Time now for our video. So if you'll, in a moment here, pause this video, go into your session there, click on this link. This is Dennis Prager, who has a series on the Ten Commandments. If you like him, you can go back and listen to all of his on the Ten Commandments. They're just 5-minute kind of gems on the Ten Commandments. And this time he's looking at do not bear false witness. So go ahead and watch that video and come back. Okay, so welcome back. A couple questions that what he had talked about truth-telling. Dennis Prager makes the startling claim that truth-telling is more important than compassion or kindness. He uses the example of how slavery, the Jewish Holocaust, and communist totalitarianism were all based on lies. What are your thoughts about this? We do tend to want to go to compassion and kindness first, I think. That is good that we are gentle and kind, but there is a risk at not sticking out for what is true and right. That truth really helps us guide our way as a whole. I think we should be much more kind and compassionate when we talk to one-to-one with people. But the overall policies of what we believe, that must be based on truth, not on what my neighbor feels. Because if my neighbor is doing something unhealthy, my goal is to be nice to them. I will just kind of overlook what they're doing as wrong. But that's not really helping them or helping me either. And so I think we need to be individually, I need to be compassionate to how I treat my neighbor. But as I set what is true, I need to go to the Bible for truth for that. So I think there is a startling need for truth. I think that our world doesn't know how to handle very well. We tend to relativize truth to make everybody feel, affirmed, and that affirmation doesn't allow people to flourish and grow.
I probably the I was ninth grade, and I went to this worldview conference, and the guy said that there are absolutely no absolutes. And that was kind of probably 98, 99 when this was starting to come to the thinking of society, or more widely accepted that there's no absolute truth. And I remember thinking it was just hilarious. Like, you're making an absolute statement and saying there's no absolutes, which was his point. So, but I think with the truth thing, we are ignoring many truths that we've, like, from the beginning of time, biology and the way things come to be and blah, 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 in order to sell a worldview that more people don't have that, like, conviction of your conscience. You get to live how you wish without condemnation, I guess. I think I always figured that was the motive. Like, people can go about their business without having to deal with guilt or repentance. So, rejection of the Christian worldview, I think, is a big key to that. Needing to believe there is no truth. So.
Good. Julie, next question.
Oh, okay. He also points out the temptation when advocating for good cause to lie in order to solicit a desired outcome. Examples are homelessness, breast cancer cases. How does this impede our ability to keep our priorities straight and allocate resources?
I'm just struck again by how we tend to turn everything to a certain advantage that I want. You know, when I'm arguing with my wife or my kids, I frame things where I look very good and they look very bad. You know, and when they frame it, they look very good and I look very bad. The truth is probably neither one of us are actually being accurate. But we have this ability, like you said, I think, Tracy, to turn things to get out of condemnation or not feeling guilty or having a certain way, that we tend to manipulate things to have our desired outcome. And that's a form of selfishness that really controls how we turn truth. And so I think we need to have that clear truth for how we can actually perform and behave and allocate what we do, our time and ability, to what really is life-giving, rather than what I wish it were to be. I think that's a key correction there.
Yes, I think it takes a very honest look on yourself.
It's hard to do.
Yeah.
I had a situation one time at the store, and I had called and I needed some snow pants for my son because he told me the night before they were going to the Boundary Waters. So I called and talked to this gentleman, and he was very nice, said he had a pair, gave me a price. I went in, and the manager called him over, and I could hear the manager, and he just belittled the man and told him that he shouldn't have given me this price over the phone. He was from a different country, the man that was helping me, and he just was treated very badly. So I don't know if it falls in this or not, but I couldn't just walk away and not say anything. So I called and talked to his manager, and I told him, I'll pay whatever price I need to pay, but you don't need to treat this man that way. He didn't do anything that was bad. He was very kind and everything, and I just thought he was treated very badly. So then, I don't know, I stuck up for him. But I thought that was kindness on my behalf, because I couldn't stand by and let him be treated in that way.
Good.
And,
Good, the truth, speaking the truth.
And it didn't matter that I was getting a better price or not. The whole matter was treating him with kindness.
And the temptation would be to use that so I get a cheaper price.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, so good job.
So.
Okay. Isaiah 29.
All right. Isaiah 29, 19 through 21. The poor will again find joy in the Lord, and the neediest of people will rejoice in the Holy One of Israel. The tyrant will be no more, the mocker will perish, and all who plot evil will be eliminated. All who incriminate others wrongly, who entrap the judge in the gate, and pointlessly postpone justice for the innocent.
Well, I'm going to go back to Deuteronomy 5, which is the other reading of the Ten Commandments. They're in Exodus 20 and then Deuteronomy 5. And the verses we're on today are 20 and 21. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. You shall not set your desire on your neighbor's house or land, his manservant or maidservant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Okay?
All right, it says there are several instructions within the Old Testament legal sections that speak to the responsibility toward neighbors. These are usually assumed to follow Israelites living nearby. Although Jesus' discussion with a legal expert in Luke 10:25-37, we see it applies to others. The last two commandments pick out two of these specific responsibilities. However, Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself, also used by Jesus, shows that these responsibilities do indeed go much wider than the two examples given here. A, not bearing false witness. It may also seem like it today, but all legal systems are dedicated to finding out the truth. Doing that is almost always dependent on the testimony of witnesses. Therefore, giving false testimony may not only damage the individual concerned, it opens cracks in the whole system. It destroys not only truth, but trust. And both of these are fundamental to the well-being of any society, and in particularly its justice system. This is why giving false testimony is often known as contempt of court, and is treated very seriously. The language of this commandment shows it certainly applies in the court cases scenario, but the concepts of truth and trust involve so far beyond that Yahweh can be tested or trusted. Yahweh can be trusted is confirmed constantly throughout Scripture. It lies at the heart of Israel's covenant relationship with Him. Truth, too, is a fundamental aspect of God's nature seen throughout the Bible. Anyone who claimed to follow God must be trustworthy and truthful in every aspect of their life. The right to privacy has become a given in Western society, and confidentiality is seen as a primary virtue. Other societies sometimes take it for granted that information about community members is public property, and for them the Western concept is privacy is incomprehensible. But in both instances, it is absolutely vital that any information shared should be correct. Even outside the courts, false testimony is unacceptable. Not coveting. There are many pressures and expectations on us today. Peer pressure, common, often controlled by commercial interests, tell us that we must have this phone, we must wear these clothes, buy this furniture, or drink this drink. Sometimes this pressure is dressed up in seemingly good value judgments. We must send our children to this kind of school, give them this kind of a holiday or that kind of a present. It is very easy for this to turn into coveting what our neighbor has. Coveting has two aspects. On one hand, craving what others have is in itself problematic because it leads to discontentment or jealousy. But secondly, coveting also involves wishing that we, instead of they, owned certain things. And as we see when Ahab desired Naboth's, am I saying that right? Vineyard, 1 Kings 21, or in Micah 12:2, the step between covenanting and taking is not a long one. But even if we don't have the power to take, Micah 2:1, coveting is still disrespecting not only our neighbor, but also both God and ourselves. God by suggesting that his provision is not adequate, and ourselves by failing to recognize the value in who we are and what we have. In today's terms, the commandment says, don't long that your neighbor's spouse could be yours. Don't get yourself in a state over how much richer she or he is, or how much bigger and better their property or business may be. And don't even think about wishing their car was really yours. In fact, accept them as they are for what they have, and learn to be content with your own situation. Philippians 4:11.
Okay, into the Bible.
All right, Micah 2:1-5. Doom to those who devise wickedness. Yeah. To those who plan evil when they are in bed. By the light of morning they do it, for they are very powerful. They covet fields and seize them, houses and take them away. They oppress a householder and those in his house, a man in his estate. Therefore the Lord proclaims, I myself am devising an evil against this family from which you will not be able to remove your necks. You will no longer be able to go about arrogantly, for it will be an evil time. On that day a taunt will be raised against you. Someone will wail bitterly. We are utterly destroyed. He exchanges the portion of my people. He removes what belongs to me. He gives away our fields to a rebel. Therefore, you will have no one to set boundary lines by lot in the Lord's assembly.
And I'm going to go to Ephesians 4:14-21, living as children of the light, living differently. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of men and their deceitful scheming. Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will in all things grow up into him who is the head, that is Christ. From him the whole body, joined together and held together by every supporting ligament, grows and builds itself up in love as each part does its work. So I tell you this, and insist on it, that in the Lord that you must no longer live as the Gentiles do, in the futility of their thinking. They are darkened in their understanding and separated from the life of God because of the ignorance that is in them due to their hardening of their hearts, having lost all sensitivity, that they have given themselves over to sensuality, so as to indulge in every kind of impurity with a continued lust for more. You, however, did not come to know Christ that way. Surely you heard from him and were taught in him in accordance with the truth that is in Jesus.
Okay, James 4:1-3. Where do wars and fights come among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? You lust and you do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war, yet you do not have because you do not ask. Ask and you do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. Okay, Leviticus 19:11 condemns all kinds of deceit, not just false testimony. Does this mean that lying is always wrong?
Well, Tracy, you're a mom who deals with this every day. Well, I didn't say it exactly. I just glared at him or whatever. Is lying always wrong?
I think that if you feel like you're going to omit parts of the story, or you mentioned trying to sell something that makes you look better or not guilty, that's probably wrong. Now, if it was life and death, I don't necessarily know about all the ethics on that, but just generally, I encourage my kids that they'll be more free if they tell the whole, every little detail truth than if they just tell me the parts that make the sibling look bad.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's weighing there's the piece here going, the sin of omission, deceit in not sharing the whole truth. There's a deceit in that. Versus the not deceit, but not trying to belittle or degrade someone by not sharing the whole truth. You know, like, my David, you're looking awfully bald lately. You know, maybe true, but you don't have to share that out loud. I try to tell, teach myself and my kids and my family, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. There's a difference between omitting for deceit's sake and omitting for kindness sake or just knowing respect in that process. I mean, that's the key. The deceit is wrong. Maybe not lying is always wrong, but the deceit piece. Because there are ethics about are there good times to lie? What if you are, take the Holocaust. Are you hiding Jews here? Well, lying versus, misleading others. And there are ethics involved with that. I don't know. Julie, what do you think?
Well, I think lying is wrong. I think you should always be truthful. And if you do lie, be truthful about it because you're going to learn from it. I know as I was kind of preparing and everything, I remembered Hagar and, is it Hagar? No, Hagar. Is it Hagar? All right, so Rahab.
Oh, yeah.
Rahab in the Bible.
Right, in the hiding the spies.
Yeah.
They were looking for the spies.
It was interesting, and so that was interesting because I'm thinking, okay, she was lying.
And because they're righteous.
Because she was protecting their lives. There was a difference there. I have another story from work. When I worked at Upshur Smith Laboratories, I worked at a pharmaceutical company. We had this big meeting, and they said, please, if anybody makes a dent in the wall or anything, we know it doesn't happen on purpose because we're wheeling these big heavy equipment around with the, these, what do you call those?
Carts?
Forks. Okay, yeah, so, because people would bump into the wall and they wouldn't take it, nobody would fess up. So here comes Julie one day, I'm pulling this huge vat of sorbitol, and I cleared the hallway and everything, come around, boom, I ended up hitting the mechanic's cart. And I had just cleared the hallway, so he must have just put it there behind me. Well, I made this big hole in the wall. I mean, it was a big hole. But I could have just went, and not said anything. But I try to be truthful. And even, when I make mistakes, and I do make mistakes, we all make mistakes. But, so I went to my lead and I said, Gail, I made a hole in the wall. She goes, that's okay, we'll let the mechanics know. No, Gail, I made a hole in the wall. So then I was called the crusher after that. But I didn't get in trouble because I told the truth. So it's important, another time I had this big ladder and I ran into the, those signs that say, I can't think of the thing, emergency signs. Well, my ladder just took it right down, boom. And, and I could have just went about my way and hush about it. But the Lord has always laid on my heart, tell the truth. And it's just better to tell the truth. And there was this other lady that I worked with, and she had like a thing coming out of her nose, and nobody would tell her. And I'm like, Gail, I said, you need to go clean your nose off. And somebody said, you told her? And I said, I couldn't have her walking around like that. I mean, seriously, that's not very neighborly, very loving and kind. I would want somebody to tell me. So I think, I just think being truthful is a good thing.
And you can truth in love.
Right,
that's
out
the
of
key.
love. Yeah. Like somebody saying, well, Pastor, you're looking really bald today. Well, that wasn't out of love. Why would you even think that? In my thinking, I'm thinking, why would I even go there to say such a thing? But the Lord's working on me too. Sometimes I think I'm a too serious person, and I need to lighten up and just be a little bit more fun. Not that to say something like that.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I'm kind of black and white, which I don't know if it's a good
I think
thing.
in general, it's you have more time success. You get out and are better off telling the truth than you are getting away with something that you could have been punished for, overall, you're far off ahead. Just always tell the
Or
truth.
leaving the store with something that you didn't pay for. That would
Yeah.
bother my conscience. Seriously, that would.
Yeah.
Just me anyway. I don't know, certain things like that, so.
Number 2.
Okay. When the Bible uses the term gossip, it usually means passing on negative information about someone. Proverbs 26, 20, 22. 2 Corinthians 12, 20. Is all talk about people unacceptable, or only that which is either wrong or negative?
I think if it's gonna be hurtful to somebody, you shouldn't talk about them. But to say something good, you know, like Pastor had an awesome sermon today. It really touched my heart, and you know, it was a good sermon.
Mm-hmm.
That would be encouraging. I think people
Mhm.
should be encouraging. I know again where I worked, because I worked there for 15 years. I wouldn't gossip about people, so people wouldn't come to me and go, "Do you know so-and-so?" Because I was like, if you're talking about work, you know, or something encouraging, but I don't want to hear anything, so, so I don't know. I'm not a big gossiper either.
Yeah, I think if you don't have clarity on that, you could just think, would I say it in front of them, and does it build them up?
Yeah.
Sometimes,
That's really helpful.
yeah, sometimes you also have to, like, I've my trusted mothers, my mom and my mother-in-law, who pray for my people. So I'll sometimes share things that aren't necessarily, you know, positive maybe about a child, but things that I am praying for their character and discernment, and then I might share with them.
Well, to share for prayer, but you're not just
Yeah.
gossiping.
Well, they're allies with
Yes.
you to build them up in the
Yes.
end.
Yes.
You have to be honest with the truth telling. You need to deal with the truthful things that are going on
Yes.
to fight against it well.
Yeah.
Like that. All right, number 3. Discuss times when you have heard or passed on information that later turned out to be incorrect. Does this matter? How important is it to check what you have heard before we pass it on?
Very important.
Yeah.
I learned from that. I had a neighbor, she told me that her neighbor said that we could go take any plant that she had on her back porch. Well, you know, 'cause she was moving, so we can have it, you know, so I believed her. I don't know if I'm gullible at times, but, so we went over there and she picked something and I picked something and we, you know, took it to our homes. Well, I found out later it wasn't true. I had to put it back. So I'm like, okay, lesson learned.
Yes.
And that was a lesson for me.
And I just don't want to spend the time of having to try to correct the error. I mean, news travels quickly. To try to once the cow is out, and try to close the barn door. It's a lot of work. I'd rather just check it out ahead of time, do the little extra effort getting it right, than having to try to undo it all. Oh no, wait, that's actually incorrect. This is it's a lot of work. It's better just pass on to work a little ahead of time to get it correct to start with.
Is there a difference between false testimony that causes someone to be wrongly convicted and false testimony that stops someone from being convicted? Does it make a difference whether the person who was stopped from being convicted was actually guilty or innocent? Well, I think it's a shame that people are convicted, wrongly convicted.
Yes.
That happens a lot.
Is the testimony biased on a certain because of something or other? You know, what is really behind going on here? Is it the question? My question is the desire to seek truth and justice, or a certain outcome that I prefer? Like the original conversation about truth being key, and certainly biases and agendas help us manipulate the truth. Even this is more of a legal case scenario here. someone getting off scot-free on a lie or getting convicted by a lie, I don't know, they're both contemptible to me.
Yes.
Mhm.
Discuss how far advertising campaigns increase the temptation for us to covet. Is it wrong to buy something just because someone we admire already has it?
Back to our commercial thing earlier. The question to me is, why do you want it? Because you want to look good, be impressive, show off, and you need to lift yourself up in some way. So I'll grab on someone else who's already highly esteemed and try to get like them, or because it's something I can really use or want or like. I think if you really like it, could use it, or just feels if you just like it, well, then it's not worrisome. If you're doing it because you need to get yourself lifted up in some way,
Keeping up with everyone else.
that's dangerous, unhealthy, unhelpful.
Yes.
Motivation there, huh?
Can get you in trouble.
Yes. Number 6. Page 4, number 6. Peer pressure is very strong. How can parents and the church help equip kids to deal with the phenomenon of keeping up with the Joneses? Is our natural desire for our children or grandchildren to have the best actually part of the phenomenon? Oftentimes, I've noticed among parents, the parents are living vicariously through their kids. And the competition among the parents is brutal about what shoes the kids are wearing on the basketball floor. Kids want to play basketball. They don't care what they're at, the younger kids. The parents want them to look really, ooh, look at my kid, what he's wearing. So there's that component. Parents often, encourage that and in their kids. And then there's the kids themselves who later on want the best only, and they want to look good, of course. But I think parents can really contribute to peer pressure, and often guilty of it, because we ourselves have not learned yet to be content with what we've got. Julie's talking about that before our recording here. What do you think?
I don't know if it's the genetics from their dad, but my kids have never been ones to ask me for the brand names, even though, I was 7th and 9th grader now, they're aware of what is trendy, but they're also content for the most part with their clothes and their dress.
Adequate.
Yeah, they're adequate. So that's not necessarily instilled in from me, because I was always aware as a kid what all the kids had and I didn't have. But I don't really know. It's kind of a tricky question. We did have a neighbor boy on his little dirt bike telling our kids that he wouldn't be their friend unless they got dirt bikes.
Oh my.
And so that's a whole other thing. Like, in order to be included in a group, you have to do or have or say. And I'm not saying my kids are immune to peer pressure. I think the things that they might stumble with is how they talk or how they treat others to look good to other certain people. I think that's maybe where it's something they have to work through a little bit.
I think part of the reason, part of what I can do as parents is because the attention getter is the one exception. The person who has the best pair of shoes or the best bike or the best grade. And part of my job is to call them to see everybody else. Look, not everybody has all that stuff. Most people don't, actually. Wherever you look, you might find the one person with the most. If you're always comparing yourself with the highest, the best, the most, you'll never be happy. You gotta find what is normal, to kind of call out what's normal. Saying this is what we're gonna go for right here.
What more would you need to make you content with what you have? Be content, I don't know, with what you have. I don't have much, but what I do have, my needs are taken care of.
I think the answer should be nothing, right?
Oh,
right? Should be nothing. I don't know if I'm there or not,
What
but
would you need?
I have my list of things I want, but
Yeah.
I can be content if I just change my attitude about it.
Mm-hmm.
The answer there should be nothing, but I'm not sure it is.
There's probably seasons where you're more content than others, but
I certainly have all I need, so.
yes. Passing thoughts can't be helped, but allowing these thoughts to take root in your mind is your own responsibility. Is this true, and does it have relevance to the commandment about coveting? Our thought life is, I think that is where most of our missteps begin, is in our thoughts. So I'm always encouraging you to test your thoughts, think it through. Does it match with the Lord's desire for us as His followers? And if it's something that just keeps persisting, but you know it's not quite right, just be aware that, we're in a spiritual battle in this world that you need to ask the Lord to help you with, so that it doesn't derail your life, I guess. Can very quickly. Because I feel like you see people are like, how did you end up here? And you 5 years ago, and this is where you're going, and now you're here. How did this happen? And I think a lot of times you discover it all began in the thoughts. Maybe not, but
Yeah, I think so.
Bible says, take captive your mind, Lord, and renew your mind. Yeah, really, that's really good. And what you allow to think about, just like what you allow yourself to spend your time on, what you allow yourself to think about is crucial for our spiritual health and our mental health. We have all kinds of random thoughts and ideas, and they're going to happen, going to come. Just what are we going to dwell on? Are we going to tell ourselves, no, that's not right, we're going to think this way instead? We must be in self-control of our minds. We're not just victims of our mind thinking. We are in control of our minds. We must navigate that in a healthy way.
yeah.
Seeing Jesus in the Scriptures. Jesus said, I am the truth. John 14:6. John's Gospel constantly stresses truth and how important a concept it is for Jesus. He didn't believe in relative truth, evidently. He sends us the Spirit of truth, John 16:13, and calls us to testify to the truth. His word is truth. Truth-telling seems to be a vital ingredient for those who are called to speak of the truth. Matthew 8:20 and 21-23 tells us something of Jesus' attitude about possessions. If he called you to give up, fill in the blank, would you still want to follow him? Wow. All right, personal application.
We are all tempted in different ways and by different things. Those who are not overly interested in other people are not tempted to talk about them. But is this necessarily a good thing? There are always gray areas, but in general, I think we all know when our talk is generous and good-hearted, and when it is unkind or reviling in someone else's difficulties or failures. Sometimes when we heard only one side of the story, we can get a false impression. When we pass this on or allow this impression to influence other people, it could be seen as a false testimony. We all know the difference between a generous-hearted appreciation of what I have someone else has, or a jealousy or greed desire to have it ourselves. This week, take a few minutes each evening to look back over the day and consider whether for you, if either false testimony or covenanting has been a part of it. Talk to God about your conclusions. How will you apply what you learned in this lesson to your life this next week?
I'm struck by the last comment with you, Tracy, about thoughts are the beginning of all of our directions. And I'm going to take my thoughts captive. It's going to be my focus, I think. Taking my thoughts captive, not letting it meander and wander however my brain wants to take it, to be being more in charge and control of it, and subjecting my mind to Christ's lordship and the truth that he is. And evaluate my thoughts and say no to this and yes to that in my thinking life. Don't let my brain just keep going. Well, I'm going to work on that. That's a piece I'm going to really work on this upcoming week, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Thank you for that.
Well, I would say the houses all around us have now done their beautiful landscaping. This is really minor. But in my condition, in my state, I'm having to be content with no landscaping in my yard this summer and just being filled with all the things we do have and provisions and not worry if anyone's looking at our yard going, oh. It's a really small thing, but I mean, everyone has just done beautiful things in their yard this weekend, so yeah, it's just
We
not
should
gonna
all
happen
get
today.
together and do something for you. Because you're great.
Yeah, it's good though. Kids would probably step in this stuff anyway, so it's probably better just to let them play and have the yard.
I'm also going to work on my mind, because I know the battle is in our minds. The Lord always says that, we need to, we have the mind of Christ. So how is God going to think about it? What does God think about this? And what does God think about that? So that's what I'm going to focus on this week.
That mind of Christ. We have access to the mind of Christ. Thank you. I'm going to use that. Very helpful. Well, love, engaging God, looking ahead. So we have one more session yet ahead. So you can still invite somebody to join in, and you can have them look at the old or the previous lessons and catch up. That's good to work on in the months or weeks ahead if you like. Maybe you can remind somebody who's not commenting on your participant lists. You can give them a phone call or a nudge in some way to stay connected. There's a homework there to read ahead if you like. And remember, your homework is to share your commercial with the participants of your group. And notice if there's any kind of marketing strategy that seems to work well or effective on our coveting trajectory here. And then if you can encourage someone else, ways that you can apply what you're learning and applying your lesson for this week ahead. So thank you to Julie and Tracy for guiding us in this session together. And our closing prayer is about contentment. Julie, you're talking about yourself. Tracy, about being content this week. So maybe this prayer is for you now in your lawn. But it's a struggle for Christian thought history. So it goes way back to the 4th century, St. Ephraim of Syria. And let's pray this prayer he's given us together for our closing. O Lord and Master of my life, take from me the spirit of laziness, meddling, lust for power, and complaining. Grant your servant instead a spirit of contentment, humility, patience, and love. Yes, O Lord and King, open my eyes to see my own failures and to not judge my neighbor. For blessed are you forever and ever. Amen. Thank you again. Next week we'll have 1 hour final lesson. Until then, keep calm and carry God.